And now a very special treat, live from Pasadena, it's the Art Center Car Classic, starring Jay Leno, featuring Stuart Reed and his band of designers. Jay's special guest today, two legendary designers, Peter Brock, who had his hand in the 1963 Corvette Stingray, and the legendary Tom Peters, who was on the team that did the 2014 Corvette Stingray. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Jay Leno.
There you go. Good to see everybody. Thanks for coming out for this. It's very exciting for me. You know, they always say you never want to meet your heroes because it's disappointing, but this is not the case here. These are two heroes of mine, and I was 13 years old when I first became aware of Pete Brock, and I don't know why I thought he'd be like 100 now, because when you're 13 and someone is designing cars like the Stingray and like the one over there, it's like, well, he must be really old. And I realized you were a guy in your 20s, which is just amazing to me, because the first time I met Pete, I was waiting for a guy with a cane, you know, and I was like, stunned, he's not that much older than I am. So that's pretty amazing. And of course, Tom, you too. Just a beautiful job with the 2014 Corvette. It is just an amazing piece of work. And the fact that you're able to do it for $52,000, which is pretty amazing. A lot of people don't know that Ferrari licenses the suspension on this car for their cars. And there's about $800,000 difference, so what's the markup there? Yeah. Okay. Now, Pete, I was reading in your, but he's got a fabulous book on the Corvette Stingray and the history of it. Boy, it's just a wonderful, wonderful read. I've read it twice already because I've got a Stingray. Tell about when you came into Art Center, how you put your portfolio together. I found that story fascinating.
I was not doing too well at Stanford. I'd gone up there to study engineering. I thought that was the way to get into the car. I wanted to be a race driver, and didn't like school up there and the way it was run. I'd heard about the school down here in California that taught you to design cars, so I took a break and came down here on Easter vacation, and I parked out in the parking lot. We were down at 3rd Street at that time, and walked in and walked around the halls there for about 2 hours, and was just blown away by the beauty of the work here. So I went up to the front desk and said, "Where do I sign? I want to go to school here." And of course they said, "Well, this is a school for professionals. They come here and polish your skills. You'd have to show us your portfolio." And I said, "What's a portfolio?" I mean, I was totally green, hadn't had a thing on it. So I went out in my car and I had my school binder there, you know, with the 3 rings and the blue lines. Sat out there and drew hot rods for about 2 hours and walked back in and said, "Will this do?" And of course, I mean, I just told them I'm not going to go away. I want to go to school here. And I literally talked my way in here, and of course when I got in, all my classmates had already been great designers that, you know, worked on the Fisher Body Craftsman's Guild. They were model builders, car designers and everything. And if it hadn't been for Strother McBen and George Jurgensen and the rest of the guys that taught me in here, I never made it. So the school really made it for me, and luckily I got to some good projects back there. We'll talk about those. I don't want to take up too much time.
Now, Tom, you were one of the first students in this campus, right? I understand you planted some of these trees. Was that part of a detention or what?
Again, I came across Art Center purely by accident, and in a class I had taken advertising illustration for 2 years in Louisiana, and came across that, and it was an epiphany, and I bolted out here in my hot rod Ford of all things. And one of the ways I used to pay for school was actually work on the yard crew here and plant a lot of these trees here, because it was the very first semester that this campus opened. So again, it was like coming to a spaceship, you know. So the school means a lot to me. I have a mother-in-law here who also saved my life. She, you know, fed me great Italian dinners that kept me going, and survived the school. And here I am.
Well, tell me about when you were a kid. You said, because we have a lot of young people here. Mom, Dad, I want to be a car designer. Smart enough, you know. That's, you know, especially back in the day when you told your parents, "I want to draw cars for a living." Was it like, "Oh my God, this is just"?
Well,
I was a comedian, so
I didn't know you could do it for a living. I just did it. It was one of the things you were compelled to do, like the guy on I think it was one of the science fiction movies where the guy's compelled to draw the Devil's Tower and Aspirated or whatever. I was compelled to do cars, ever since I was 4 or 5. But one of the things that really struck me was, how many here old enough to know Big Daddy Roth, and all that he did? You know? Yeah. He's the one that really propelled me into, I think, not unknowingly what car design was. If you can indulge me for 1 second here, I brought a couple things, and you're going to find them kind of funny, because this is how I kind of learned how to draw little things here, and I'll just take a minute here. These are, I kind of looked at those. In Hot Rod magazine, they had 2-page spreads of t-shirt designs that he would do, and the guys that would work for him, like Robert Williams, did the artwork. And so I was amazed by those, because there was a lot of car artwork, but there was stuff that there were cars that were done for these t-shirts, they were correct somehow, mechanics and all that. So I dug these up. These are like, I used to get a piece of paper from school, and these are, actually I sketched this as in 1969, a 69 C28 Camaro. Kind of got me started, learned how to draw circles, and that's why I would inspire kids to start drawing everything you see, not only cars.
So they get a lot of floods in Louisiana. You
well, they're all jacked up, and you got to see all the suspension. This one's a little lower. This is a '69 Corvette, done in 1969, but you had to see all the guts and the gear and stuff like that. So started there, and obviously came to Art Center, and hopefully I include my artwork, and then once you go to work, you're around so many talented people. I'll tell you, like similar to you, when I came to Art Center, I just drew hot rods and things, but there are folks here that really understood in a much more worldly way what design was. And that was all great, but really what it comes down to, I think, is for the young kids to have that passion, something you feel strongly about, and you're creative, always trying to create something new, not just drawing what else is out there. So that, I would add, just understand 3D sculpture.
Now, Pete, let me ask you about working under a legendary figure like Bill Mitchell. Now, back in those, we don't really have those towering kind of figures anymore that they kind of sweep their hand and the whole thing disappears. I mean, was it frightening to go to a guy like that? What kind of guy was he? Was he encouraging? Did he shoot you down? What was that like?
Bill Mitchell at that time was the heir apparent for they had a position at General Motors at that time. Harley Earl was running it. And Harley Earl was a very, very tall, quiet, imperious person who never spoke to any of his designers. He'd travel over the retinue of lieutenants behind him, and if he wanted a line changed on the board or something, he'd say, Chuck, tell the designers to move that line down a bit. And then Chuck Jordan would walk over and tell us to move the line down or up or whatever it was. Bill Mitchell, on the other hand, always kind of wanted to be one of the guys. He'd come in, take off his jacket, sit down with you, and start talking to you like a friend. You always knew he was the boss. He was really a top dog guy, but always very friendly and encouraging. And the best thing that Bill Mitchell did is he let you reach out. He'd always keep pushing you. You'd come up with something really good, he'd like it, he'd tell you how much he liked it, but he'd say, come on, I want to see more, I want to see more. And we'd go past that point, and then he'd draw you back and find where his stuff was. So he's a great leader. I really enjoyed working for Bill Mitchell.
He had fiery passion too, though, didn't he?
He was probably the most flamboyant.
Well, I always remember he had a pair of motorcycle leathers made for him, and he was kind of chubby, and the leathers would be like, you go to the races and that fat rich guy with the suit that's just a little bit.
Yeah, right.
And do you guys ever have the guts to tease him about that?
Yeah. He had the custom-made leathers and silver suits and stuff. And he'd ride his Ducati motorcycles around on them, and he just loved the whole aura of being over the top, and it was really fun to work for him.
Now, Tom, tell us about this new Stingray, making this the rear deck. It's an iconic brand, bringing it back. How nerve-wracking was that?
You give it some thought. For me, I think the trick there is twofold. One is you understand where the car came from. You don't think about it too much, and you rely heavily on a really creative team. I'm here to really represent. I represent a team of very talented designers, engineers, and sculptors in particular. that you build a team with these folks and give them a few clues, a few pointers. Like I told them, for instance, we're not going to do round tail lights.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. That's probably the most controversial aspect of the car, because you read the blogs and half love it, half hate it, and I'm guessing that's probably an age thing.
Well, it could be. I'd venture to say the traditional customers are probably most shocked by it, but what I tell people is my focused customer for that were 9 and 10-year-old kids.
Yeah.
Because we all remember when we were kids like that, the passion stopped. There were two things I wanted. I looked forward, one of my visions was I told my guys, I want this car to go down the street and actually witness this, a group of kids talking, waiting for a bus, and I happened to be in one, and they stopped, they pointed, and they went, Stingray! And that's what I wanted, because we remember that as kids. And to me, they don't really care about round tail lights. They just want something that looks really cool, but when you stand back and look at it, it says either Stingray or Corvette. And I think that's what our job in life is designed to do, is not continue the same thing, but to create new and take it to the next level. And to me, Corvette has always been a sign of the times.
Now, Pete, tell us about the 59 Racer, because that's probably the most important concept cars of all time. And certainly a car to this day looks as vibrant as it did, and there's nothing old-fashioned about it. It looks like a car that could have come out in the last couple of years. Tell us about that.
Well, the Stingray Racer is really a great plateau in design history in General Motors. And the way it came about was rather unusual, because just prior to that period, when we got started in the middle 50s, management had decided that they were going to curtail all performance, not just in General Motors, but Harlow Curtis, president of GM at that time, and he's gotten together all the rest of the manufacturers, and they came up with what they call the AMA ban, American Automobile Manufacturers Ban. And they couldn't even talk about performance and advertising anymore, and all performance cars were banned, and they were supposed to be sent to the crusher. Just prior to that point, Harley Earl and Zora Duntov had decided they were going to build the ultimate Corvette. They didn't know about this other plan that was going on, and had built a car called the SS Corvette, which was really the first real race car that had been done by General Motors, and the project was led pretty much by Zora Duntov. They ran it at Sebring. It was very, very fast. It didn't have good brakes. It didn't last. But both Juan Fangio and Sterling Moss drove the car, broke the lap record with it, but it couldn't go more than about 3 or 4 laps before the brakes went out, so it didn't last too long. But that was the really the turning point. And then the AMA ban came in. That car was supposed to be thrown away. It was supposed to go to the crusher. Zora Duntov sneaked it out, sent it to the Indianapolis Museum where it resides today. But there was a test chassis we call the Mule, which all the development stuff had been done on. And Bill Mitchell bought that car for $1 and decided that he was going to resurrect the whole Corvette program, but he had to do it in secret. So he resorted to subterfuge, because normally the Corvette design would have gone upstairs to the regular production studio where normally cars were done. But to keep it out of the view of top management, who had keys to all of the different design studios, he brought it downstairs to what we call a research design studio, where the young designers like myself were. I'd only been in there less than a year, and we were kind of working on advanced concepts. He walked in there after going over to the Turin show in 1957, and he had seen several cars that he was really impressed with. One of them was the Alfa Romeo Disco Volante. There were some streamliners that had done by Stanguigui, by Abarth, and Farina. And they all had a similar theme. They all had a very sharp belt line all the way around. If you look at the Stingray over here, you'll see that. And they all had 4 aerodynamic shapes over the wheels. And these cars, the Disco Volante had already been out for about a year and a half, but it had been really considered the first real breakaway design since the Farina design of the Cisitalia 2002. So it was getting great press in Europe, and Bill felt there was a solid direction there. So he took a lot of pictures of these little streamliners that they ran on the high banks of Monza and Avis, and brought those all back, brought them into the studio, and laid them out. I mean, we didn't know, I'd never met Bill Mitchell before, but he walked in just like sort of one of the guys wanted to be, took off his coat, sat down at one of our desks and said, "Gather around, guys, I want to talk to you," and laid out these photographs, and we didn't know quite whether he was going to tell us about his summer vacation or what. But as he kind of warmed to the subject, you know, he was saying, "I want to do a new Corvette," and we're kind of looking at each other like, us? You know, this is going to be our project? And he didn't explain why or what the politics were, but he laid it out and we thought, well, he must be doing this in every studio. But he wasn't. He was only doing it in our studio. And as it turned out, he selected a few of my sketches to work from that went into full size. And we ended up working on a sort of a production version of the car that you see here. It was started out to be the real production coupe. But the problem was is that the band didn't go. He knew that it eventually, you know, these things politically ebb and flow. He knew his time would come. So the car continued on, and we built it on this mule chassis that had run testing at Sebring. So it got shortened down to a 90-inch wheelbase, and turned out to be, you know, quite an impressive looking automobile. So when it came out, management finally discovered what had gone on. And I've got to say that Larry Shinoda and Tony Lupine were the guys that refined this car. It went back upstairs into another secret studio that he built specifically to do this car. And it was hidden behind what we call the hammer room, where all the artisans that worked within General Motors would get their tools, because they couldn't come in and out with their tools every day. That would breach of security. So they had all the tools there, and these guys would check them out, and this is called the hammer room. So we put a false wall in the hammer room and built a studio behind it, and that's where the Mako Shark and the XB87 Racer were done. So that car eventually morphed into the 63 production car, which you see over here, the silver car.
Tom, talk a little bit about, you know, I was talking to some of the students, and they were talking about engineers working with designers. But it seemed like in the old days, designers kind of had free range. You know, you brought up disc brakes or anything like that. Oh, that's crazy. You don't need to go like that. You know, blah, blah. It was all seemed to be designed. There didn't seem to be a lot of aerodynamics. Was it in the 50s and 60s and 70s, was it mostly pure design? Or, like now it seems like the engineers work very closely with the designer. Is that true or no?
I think it's really true in the case of the Corvette. It's the vehicles I've been involved with, particularly on Corvette, the past few generations. Because of the capability of these cars being high performance, yes, they're very fun cars, but yet I call it they're serious fun cars. I mean, imagine, it has to look beautiful, but they are capable within the realm of 200 miles per hour in mortal hands. And many folks that run these bring it beyond that are competition applications. But it's done in a way which I find as a designer, because to me, the difference between styling and design is that design is, you know, fulfilling and coming up with a solution that's executed beautifully. That's what design is. And so that's the wonderful challenge of a car like that, because this, I think, is, in my view, one of the best examples I've been involved with, where every surface, every detail, every radius in that car is thought out from a performance standpoint. Mainly aerodynamically. Even the radius is back on the back edge, the tiny in the millimeter level. Work closely with engineers to achieve that, because safety is a huge importance, stability obviously, in that realm that I'm talking about. So to be able to accomplish that and have something that is wonderfully beautiful, artistic, dynamic sculpture to it, I think is just a designer's dream. The other thing I would add on this too is that when you look at the Stingray and previous Corvettes, and there are other cars as well too, the design studio is primarily has focused responsibility for the aerodynamics of the vehicle body. So although we have aerodynamic engineers, it's the design studio that drives the solutions and the decisions around the end results.
And how restrictive is government regulation? Like, to me, in my mind, 1966 was about the last year of pure design, with the Miura, cars with no bumpers. Now you've got to be able to hit them, you hit them in the knees, they've got to get up laughing, all that kind of, all these sort of rules, hoods that have airbags in them. For example, they can no longer build the Ford GT because the headlights are so many millimeters too low. So they've got to totally. How hard is it to work around those restrictions?
Definitely. I mean, we all know this is a much more complicated world that we all live in. You got to navigate through it, but some of the the parameters are, you wonder why they do that, but when you dig down into it deeply, it's responding to specific needs of customers. Sometimes say, well, maybe they don't realize, or maybe it doesn't matter to them. But again, I kind of revert right back to what schools like Art Center are about, where it is design. It's not creating pretty pictures. We're problem solvers with execution that's done beautifully. And so we take this as challenges that we look forward to head on straight on. And yes, it is more difficult, but when you come up with a solution that's wonderful, that people respond well to, that you feel good about, that you actually, I'll tell you what, I love, we love sketching and drawing, but I'll tell you what is really satisfying for me is getting, a couple of engineers, a couple of sculptors, designers around, and we still do this, although we have all the technology around, a little pencil drawing, staple on a board, and hammering out an engineering section to resolve one of these issues, and to come up with just a beautiful, elegant solution is incredibly satisfying. So that's why I come to work every day.
Now, Pete, it's hard to believe 50 years experience between this Corvette and the early ones. What's the biggest change you've seen?
Well, at the time that we did the original car for Mitchell, of course, there was a lot of, let's say, controversy between Bill Mitchell and Zora Arkasuntoff. Zora was the guy that really had the vision for the yellow car that you see here today. All of the great things that Zora wanted to put in that car have finally evolved into the C7. It is really, it's a beautiful car, but technically underneath it's a fantastic automobile. At the time that we did the car for Mr. Mitchell, there was so much contention about how much engineering would go into the car and how much would be silent. And since the car was pretty much designed because of GM design styling, and they owned the rights to the car, he was really superior to Chevrolet engineering, and had some great battles, especially over the split window with Zora Duntoff, which are now sort of legendary.
Yeah, let me ask you about that, because a buddy of mine's dad bought a '63, and after having the car for 4 years, he cut out the split window and put in a full piece of glass so it looked like a modern Corvette. And of course, the value of it went way down. Why do you think the split window is so iconic? Or is it just that it's better looking?
I think that much of it is just like you say, it's the coin with an imperfection, because it's only 1 year. And of course, that was the initial year that came out, and that was what Bill Mitchell wanted to do. The split window was nothing new. It had already been done by Bill Mitchell and by Don Harley Earl in an earlier car called the Golden Rocket, which was a show car, and he'd actually lifted that split window off of a '53 Franco Scaglione design, which was done for Turin, which was called the Bat 5, I think. So Bill Mitchell wanted to do that, and he also admired the '57 SC Atlantique Bugatti. So the things that you see with split windows is nothing new on the Corvette. So it was a styling cue that they wanted to do in there. And Bill always wanted some definition on the car. He'd walk in, he was always perfectly dressed, his pants were perfectly pressed, and he'd see a flat surface, he'd say, I want a little crease in there, just like I've got in my pants here. He was a great guy for line, and he fought for that because he loved it. And Zora wouldn't go for it because he knew by the time it got through engineering, it wasn't going to be this wide. It was going to be 4 inches wide, and you wouldn't see through it. So Ed Cole, who was the head of engineering, solved the problem and said, okay, Bill, you get to do it for 1 year, and then we're going to put the full window in, which was actually cheaper to do because you didn't have to do all the extra trim.
Tom, let me ask you a question. Much like the 911 is locked into the rear engine design, they ever change that, people go crazy. The Cayman, obviously better handling car, but you've got to have the 911 because the engine's always been there. People talk about, we've seen sketches and teases of a mid-engine Corvette. Do you think it's just Corvette is front engine rear drive? Is that the definition of Corvette? Or do you think you'll ever see a mid-engine someday?
I've been involved with various explorations of midship Corvettes. And I will tell you that question is always asked. I'm not going to answer it here today.
All right, take back the Lifetime Award. I'm sorry, no.
But I mean, just imagine, again, there's all sorts of opportunity there, and it's, for me, a designer, that is the quintessential proportion. Well, to do that, can I just build on just a couple of comments on the question about the split window? From my perspective, not having been involved with that car, but looking back at that as an icon from designers of my era, I think, to me, that car was cool when it came out. It's cool now. I would bet you a donut. In 100 years, that car will still be super cool. And why is that? There are elements like the split window that are, we talked about the seriousness and the design and all that, but there is, on the other side of the coin, there is that artistic element that adds the soul and personality of these cars, and that's why we're all here today, is because we resonate with that. And from a designer standpoint, my position as a leader, then working with a very talented team to capture that essence of personality and spirit. So you're creating more than a machine. I guess part of the magic of the car. You're creating an individual that has personality and soul. That's what you strive for. And those elements give that to these wonderful pieces of glass and sheet metal and all these wonderful materials, like a family member. Everybody has certain characteristics about their face or the way they talk, their eyes. That add character, and if they miss that, it wouldn't be the same. And that's why you look forward to seeing them every day, and you want to spend time with them. That's kind of, without getting too kind of hokey there. I'm telling you, that's the truth. You're trying to create individuals.
Well, the thing I'm proudest of is when I see the Europeans suddenly, I guess the Corvette's okay. I mean, you can see that they realize it is now a world-class car.
Especially when they see the taillights at the Autobahn.
Yeah, right. And especially when they see the price. I mean, you're really getting Italian, exotic speed and performance at Chevrolet prices. I mean,
performance.
It's pretty amazing.
Serious.
And my last question for you two guys is, what do you think the Corvette will look like, or what do you think it'll be 50 years from now?
I think you're still going to be able to look at it without even any badges or nameplates on it. Say that is a Corvette that'll definitely be taking full advantage of all the technology and the artistry of that day. But you're going to have that. You're going to have that element of artistic quality that folds into that. To me, I'll tell you what's wonderful about technology. It enables the artistic side more than ever has before. Again, lamps are a perfect example of that. The sculpture, we spend as much time inside that headlamp as we do for the entire body. And I tell you, my son, I remember he was like 7 or 8, and he was kind of disappointed with the last year. He goes, "Dad, why is there still Corvettes? Why is there still wheels on the Corvette?" And he was serious. That's how young folks think, in that age. So who knows? Stay tuned. I mean, you know what? We'll know when we get there.
Well, it's funny because when we were kids, we all thought we'd see flying cars, and you thought instead of a dinner you'd eat a pill, but nobody ever predicted GPS. Nobody ever guessed that you could sit in your car and, it didn't even come up. So I'm just wondering what futurist view you would think of the car. What do you think, Pete? What do you think it will be in 50 years?
I'm not really sure where we're going on this, because there's a whole design philosophy that an automobile of the future should be this bubble that you get into and punch a button and it takes you automatically on a road someplace. And that's so foreign to the way I feel, because there's no passion, there's no love, there's no personality between the tactile feel between the road and yourself. So I can see that a lot of government regulation can move us in that direction. I don't think that's a good idea.
You don't want to drive an iPhone, is what you're saying.
No, I don't.
I was going to add to that too, is like when you think of, say, for instance, music or architecture. I mean, today you think about our studio, brought like stereo speakers, and we're playing everything from Sinatra to dubstep. I mean, wow. Because I think that influences the creativity of the team. And I will tell you, just like today, I see it even becoming more diverse. There's going to be the right application for those folks that want to get into some sort of transportation automobile device that takes them there. But I also think, just as in music, there's different styles that reach to the heart and soul of just a wide variety of people. So that's when I get back to this enabler of technology. I think you're going to be able to have a full range of type vehicles, maybe even a full range of capabilities and personalities of Corvette when you go forward, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm one of those people who believes designers and engineers will save the world. I mean, I really do. I mean, when Malta said that an acre of land can only feed 10 people, and this many people in the world, this many going to starve. Well, now an acre of land can feed 100 people or 1,000 people. And a car like the Corvette, the stock car is 450 horsepower, but it gets 30 miles per gallon. I mean, 50 years ago it would have been 5 miles per gallon. So, I mean, I think you guys are the future, and you make it what it is. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's truly an honor. Congratulations on your work. Thanks, folks. We'll be right back with Carrot Top, ladies and gentlemen.
Can I take just a minute here? I got a couple things. One for Stuart Reed, if you could come up here. And I brought a couple of things here from the design team. They wanted to be here, and since they couldn't, I have a couple of things here. Just something small token here. I brought a couple of.
And look at how much bigger yours is than the little award they gave you.
I've got a couple of squares here too, but I'll tell you again, this represents best. Well, I'm gonna just grab one of these here. I want to tell you what's this here. There's a couple of images here I got from the guys. Designed from actually the key designer, Hassap Lee, that actually penned the car. The team, he put this image together, of course, the controversial taillights in the back. It was signed by the central members of the design studio team here. And these are just some special images we put together. We've only done a few of them. So.
And there's a Lamborghini Aventador up there.
So, Stuart, I'm going to give you guys both of these. Sure.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Jim.
And I urge you to buy Pete's book. It's a fantastic book on the history of the Stingray. And get the leather edition. That's the expensive one, right? That's the one I got. Yeah, it's really good. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for this.